This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every week, it is the great one. It's Rob Reinhold.
You know, your introductions are getting more and more grandiose, and I literally can't live up to them. The great one? Oof, that's tough. So let's go a little lower. I've always had the attitude in life to underpromise and overdeliver. If people think you're going to be terrible and then you turn out to be average, it's a pleasant surprise. When you build me up as the great one and then I turn out to be average, it's a disappointment. So let's have this be our top one now, and let's just go down from here.
Fair enough, but in today's episode, we are talking about what it is to be great. This is obviously not going to be a very zoomed in episode. It's going to go over a lot of things we talk about on this podcast. But this is more of a kind of a broad scale, holistic episode that Rob put together. And when he and I were talking about it before the show, we're like, you know what, let's not really even talk about this one. Rob put the whole thing together. Rob, I'm just going to have you run, and I'll jump in wherever you would like me to, because I want to see how you put this together, why you put this together the way you did, and what kind of overall point are you arriving to at the end, because I don't know that. We never, like I said, we never really discussed it at length. So fire it up and let's go.
It's that time of year where you get the high school commencement speeches, the college commencement speeches. Basically, at any sort of graduation here in the United States, you have a speaker that gets up and talks to all the people that are graduating and basically talks about, hey, you're at the infancy of your career. You know, as you graduate high school, hey, you're just starting out, going out in life. And these are the things that you need to know in life. And I came across a talk that Roger Federer gave. For those of you that don't know, Roger Federer is one of the best tennis players of all time. And he gave this talk, and it spoke to me. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to talk about in this episode, because this speech is absolutely fantastic. Now, Patrick, I'm going to give you the link, and I would love for you to put it on your YouTube channel. And it's just the part that we're going to talk about. It's only 2 minutes long. If you want to see the whole talk, I highly recommend it, but I just really want to focus in on these 2 minutes. So if you want to, pause the video and go to YouTube, watch this clip, and then come back on. And I really want to talk about exactly what he talked about.
Yeah, so I did watch the clip when you gave it to me. It really was interesting. He goes over a lot of the stuff that we talk about here, but in a slightly different way. And I think that's good to hear, especially from somebody like, you know, I watched plenty of Roger Federer, you know, growing up, and he was, to me, like the ultimate final boss. Like, he was just so good at everything and so technically near perfect that if you beat him, you were almost like just on your best day. You know, the back and forth between him and Rafa Nadal were just some of the best matches of all time, because they were just so two completely conflicting styles on top of that. But to hear him say what he said, and to an American audience, no less, to where I think it made a lot more sense. We can talk about that too if you want, Rob. But yeah, great clip, 2 minutes of your life. You can just pause and click it right now if you want, so you can kind of understand what we're about to talk about here. But definitely highly, highly recommended taking 2 minutes out of your day to do that.
The first thing Roger Federer talks about is his kind of long-term success. He talks about over his entire career, he won over 80% of his matches. Now, a match is where you play a game against another tennis player, and it's consisted of a whole bunch of little points that you have to get. For those of you that don't know tennis, don't worry about it. But a match is basically you beat an opponent. And he talks about, you know, the championships he's won, and then he starts to break it down into smaller things. And so he says, I won about 80% of my matches. That is just phenomenal. That's a phenomenal number. And you look at that number and you say, oh my gosh, how could someone be that good? But then he started to break it down. And he said, a game of tennis is all about points. So if you do an analogy of like American football, it's about a play. You know, basically you run a play or you do some small thing. He said, in my career, I won 54% of the points I played. Think about that. Here's this great tennis player who has had all the success, but when he played against other opponents, he only won 54% of the time. Now, Patrick, I don't know if you are connecting the dots here, but I'm sure you are, but I want everyone else to connect the dots here. We talk a lot about trading. We talk a lot about these big, grandiose things of success in trading. But when you break it down, 54% win-loss ratio. Is that an acceptable ratio in the world of trading?
It's absolutely essential. There's some times where I would like to be hitting at 54% myself, but it's always interesting to hear somebody who wins 80% of his matches and it is so technically perfect and had such a high first serve percentage on top of that to still only win 4% over a coin flip every other point. So it really, I think, speaks to what we're talking about today.
After Roger Federer talked about his 54%, he then starts to break it down into some real smaller numbers. And he talks about it's not about perfection. It's about consistency. And he talks about how every single point should be treated as it is the most important point of your entire life. So basically, he says, I didn't take any points off. Every single point was the most important point of his entire life, whether it was in the first round of Wimbledon or it was in the finals of Wimbledon. Basically, giving full effort to the moment. Then the next thing he said is, the last point that happened means nothing. So just think about that. All of that effort, all of that struggle to win 54% of his points, and yet he says none of that matters. Because guess what? The next point is the only thing that matters to you.
Yeah, so if you haven't figured it out, we're correlating all of this to trading. And I want to see what you think about this, Rob. I'm going to agree and disagree. I mean, yeah, having a short memory is paramount. We talk on the show about that. One of my earliest trades with Maverick and how I made a mistake and lost a whole bunch, and I was really salty over it because I blamed the platform and all that. And I don't think about it today, but it hung on my mind for a long time, and it really did me no favors. And I've had losses in the past where I might have made a mistake, and those are always the worst because it should have been a win, but you did something stupid, and now you've turned an easy win into a hole you have to dig yourself out of now, and that's no good. So I think he's 100% right on that. You and I have talked about having a short memory as well. The one pushback I will give is in the context of what he's saying. Yes, you want to, in every point, you should put your all into it. I mean, I can see how you would do that in life and in work and things like that, but not in trading. I don't think you should be putting your all into a trade. I think you should be dead inside. You should follow a system, and you should leave your all off to the side because your all includes your heart, your effort, everything like that. And leaving it all on the table like that in the trading world, there's nothing romantic about that. It's stupid. It's going to affect you. So I guess that's the only pushback I would have there.
I don't think that's pushback at all. This is literally almost every single episode we have done in this podcast is about this struggle right here of each trade having its own life and its own thing and its own, it goes up and down. And for you to be, in that moment, and then you're supposed to go to the next trade and completely flush away every single thing that happened in that last trade, and you're supposed to attack the next one. And again, when we say about your all, we're basically saying you do it perfect. And to do it perfectly, you do it without emotion. You just follow rules, follow what you've decided and what you've backtested. So I don't think it's pushback at all. I think it is the realization of the reality of we get in these situations where we get these trades And these trades can sometimes bring so much stress and emotion. And yet, how are you supposed to not take that into the next part of your life? And that's literally what most of our podcast is all about. So I think you're spot on there. And I think that is the struggle that we're talking about in this podcast, is how do you actually do that? In Roger Federer's talks, he talked about how the last point doesn't matter. And this is what he says, okay, the last point, I just got beat by a great lob shot. You know what he says? It was just a point. Or that last one, I did a double fault. You know what? It's just a point. And then he says he makes some amazing play. He has his overhead smash, and it's on ESPN on the #1 greatest play of that week. Do you know what he says about that? It's just a point. So we need to be able to adopt this into our trading, to where we understand that we're going to make some great trades in our life. And guess what? It's just a trade. And in fact, I want you to start to take that saying into your own personal life. It was just a trade. It was just a trade. That's it. And guess what? Sometimes it's going to make the highlights. Sometimes it's going to make the lowlights. But your career is not going to be determined by those points. Just think about that. And again, an analogy in tennis. Okay, so he had this wonderful, amazing shot in Wimbledon one year. Guess what? That doesn't make a career. What really makes a career is what you do with those points, what you do to prepare for those points, and then how consistent you can be going forward. And so he goes through all of this about how he's had great shots, he's had terrible shots, and he's won 54% of his points. And then in this where he really gets into, he says, the best in the world are the ones that can flush away what just happened and be dedicated and focused and consistent. And he says, look, you're going to have some down times. You're going to have doubts. Your opponents are going to have doubts as well. The best in the world are the ones that can get rid of those negative doubts and move on and go ahead. The best in the world go forward, even when faced with adversity.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to what I was saying before about him speaking to an American audience. And this is one of the things you and I did talk about before, Rob. And this isn't me playing home team bias, and I get accused of that on my other podcast a lot. But in the United States, the reason why there's so much innovation that comes out of here and so much enterprise that comes out of the United States even still is because we have a mentality to where it's okay to fail. Not only that, there's people out there who celebrate it, even fetishize failure. Because, I've even said it on my own videos. That's one mistake you're probably never going to make again, which is great. So every time that happens, you just become stronger and stronger and stronger and harder to take down. Other cultures don't always see it that way. So I'm not sure, where you are in the world listening to this right now or what your upbringing was. But some cultures are afraid to even start because the price of failure would be too great. It would wipe them out. And so they just don't have that in them. There are other cultures to where failure is not accepted at all. It is shunned. And this probably affects people too. So wherever you are in the world, just know I feel for you if you didn't have the same culture as I did in regarding failure as far as your upbringing goes, but it doesn't matter. I wrote this in my book. Forex does not care. It does not know you, it does not care about you, and it will not make different rules for you just because of your situation. It's a blank slate. So you better adapt this mindset on failure real quick if you haven't already.
And I would guess the fact that people are here and listening to this and have made it to your platform, they're already there. They're already there. You are not your parents. You are not the negative aspects they passed on to you. You're not the negative aspects of your neighborhood or your city or your culture. Look, you have the choice, but another recurring theme in this podcast is you must be self-aware enough to recognize that. So, look, I agree with you, Patrick. Every personality is different, and all the things that we get growing up can sometimes be some roadblocks that we need to get over. But being self-aware is the first step to getting over those. And I'm sure that the fact that people are here listening to you, that they have already made a lot of those roadblocks go away.
Yeah, I would hope so. I don't know where in the stage of trading they are. When you've arrived at a channel that is this structured and you understand the importance of that, I think that already says a lot about you, because most traders are still, to this day, well over half the traders out there are rogue traders that have no structure, no consistency. They just come in, and if something looks good, they take it. So that's a lot of your competition out there. So you've already sprung ahead of them. Now it's just a matter of kind of fine-tuning things, and that's where things like this podcast come in.
And that leads perfectly into the first step of what it means to be great. Work. It's work. Now, we've talked about this in the podcast. We all kind of got into this because we looked at all the other sorts of work that you could do, and Patrick, you worked at restaurants. Other people have worked construction or other jobs that they didn't love. And we looked at trading, we said, oh my gosh, that doesn't look like a ton of work. And then you get into it, and surprise, guess what? It's simply a lot of work, and you're going to have to work. To become great, yes, there are some people that are born with genetic advantages. There's no question about it. Like, let's just take someone like a Michael Phelps. He's a gold medal swimmer. He is 6'5" and lean and has longer arms than the regular person, and he has larger hands than the regular person. So when he swims, he can literally push more water than pretty much anyone else in the world. Okay, so he had a genetic gift. Guess what? That guy worked and worked and worked harder than, I can't say harder than the rest, because maybe there's someone who worked a little harder than him and just wasn't genetically gifted. But guess what? He worked and worked and worked. You cannot avoid that. I'm sorry. If you got into trading because you wanted a way to make money easy, guess what? Everything's work. There is no easy path in life. Everything is work. So you better get used to working. And again, working and trading is backtesting, developing systems, learning new things, all the things that Roger Federer talked about that it takes to be the best is to, again, work smarter. He's always talking about working smarter. It's never done. I mean, Patrick, you've been in this game for, 13, 14 years? Are you still learning things?
All the time, yeah. And I learned a lot of things from my subscribers in the comments section. Sometimes they'll mention something, and I was like, you know what? It's a really good point, and I have never thought of that. And that makes sense. I'm one person, and these are a bunch of people, with different inputs and things like that. I can't, my brain's not big enough to do the work of 1,000 people. So, yes, I've even made adjustments to my own trading based on what they've said. I have looked at certain indicators in a different light based on what they've said. I've had brand new ideas come into my trading based on what they've said. So yeah, for sure. It's been a really big advantage, I think. Kind of a unique advantage. I don't think a lot of traders have the knowledge pool that I can draw from at any time.
And I would agree. I have learned so much from watching our own traders trade. I'm every single day watching over a couple hundred traders and going through their monthly reports, their weekly reports. It is amazing what you can learn from other people, but you have to be open to learning. And this is where, most of the successful people you meet are going to be very humble. Now, yes, you get a couple people that aren't humble, but they understand that to get to the top, you've got to be a sponge. And when you get to the top, people are trying to knock you off. So you constantly have to be innovating. You constantly have to be growing and learning. You are never there. If you think that one day you're going to get your trading system down and then you can kick back and put your feet up and never have to work again, you are going to be very disappointed because the market changes, technology changes, everything changes. This is what Roger Federer talked about, is that can you be fully present in the moment, but can you completely forget the last trade you make? Can you show up and run your system over and over again, and then can you stop, run analysis, look at all of the actual data, make adjustments that you need to make, and then come back and do the same thing? It's really about, again, this long-term process of, yes, fighting for every single point, but fully understanding that that's not going to make your career. Whatever happened last month on that one trade is so incredibly meaningless. It's very easy for me to say that now. I've been doing this for 27 years. I remember in my very first year, every trade was just such a roller coaster, and it truly did matter. And it allowed me, or it caused me to take baggage into the next trades, and it's just something you have to learn. So look, the first part, and we've talked about this, the first 6 to 12 months is you're learning how to play tennis. You're learning the right hits, the right everything else. After that, you're learning how to be consistent and shake things off.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why I ever thought this, but I really thought you do have to just put your all into every trade and just live or die by the results. No, the absolute opposite is true. So, we're kind of going back to the same point over and over here, but we're finally to this part of his talk. And again, that's the only one part I would disagree with, but only in the framework of trading.
Yep. Actually, putting your all in is a negative. And I've talked about this. There is such a thing as too much research. Once you do too much research, you start to get emotionally invested in the trade. And when people research who the CEO is and they know about the CEO and his kids and all that stuff, it's all of a sudden it's like, oh boy, you've gone way too far. This is just a point. It's just a point. Can you be consistent over your life? That is going to dictate whether you're going to be great or not. I don't care how smart you are. I have traders that are genius level that struggle. I have some traders that I would say are average intelligence. They thrive. Why? What's the difference? One of them can follow their rules better than the other. That's what makes a difference in the end. So take this Roger Federer talk and really look at your life and look at what are you placing your emphasis on. Are you putting your emphasis on the next point or the next tournament? Who cares? Who cares? Are you going to show up to every tournament, every point? Are you going to be consistent? Are you going to practice? Are you going to learn? Are you going to grow? And can you keep this pace for 40 years? Now, I've been doing this for 27 years. I have worked so many hours at this, but yet clicking a button is the smallest part of the work I've put into this. I intend to keep going and keep learning and growing and just becoming a better human being. And I know, we're talking about trading, but there's so many parallels to other aspects in your life. Can you show up every day and be a good parent? Can you show up every day and be a good spouse? Can you show up every day and be a good son or daughter? That's what this is all about, is can you keep up the pace for 40 years? And if you can, I'm telling you, you're going to be very happy with where you are in 40 years.
It's interesting, too. You talked about how geniuses don't always make good traders. And this is something else we've talked about on the show, how sometimes they end up being your biggest failures. Now, you guys at home might be listening right now and say, wow, Robb and VP, those are really a couple of geniuses. Listen to the way they talk and the way they break things down. First of all, I don't think that's true. I tested out as a genius as a kid, but I have not taken that test since. I don't think I would score the same way as I did 30 some odd years ago. But you're going to notice, too, since we're talking about sports, if you ever hear a lot of these athletes talk, as great as they are and as smart as you have to be at what you do to be great, you listen to them talk, they're the most average sounding, almost sometimes dumb sounding people you're ever going to listen to. I mean, listen to a hockey player, for Christ's sakes. They all talk the same way. There are very few hockey players out there with any personality, any ability to come at you with something like just at a completely profound angle. Like, it just doesn't exist. Yet they are so good at what they do, and there's so many moving parts of that game that you have to be aware of and sharp about and have experience in all this type stuff. And then you hear them talking, they're just like, it's the same stuff over and over again. And I've noticed this too, kind of in trading. You'll see these interviews, because these channels have gotten a lot more popular now. We interview this millionaire trader, or this guy that won this contest or did all this. These guys are the most average-looking, almost doofus-looking dudes you'll ever see. There are no nerds. There are nobody, with all these profound angles on anything. So I think that's very telling. Now, maybe you are not one of those people. Maybe you have a little more to offer on the personality side or the charisma side or the intelligence side. But it just goes to show, when you sit down in front of that computer, you got to be that hockey player that says the same 10 words in every interview.
Patrick, I don't think we've ever done this, but I would like to ask you one personal question, and then I'd like you to ask it to me, because I really think this is a great way to wrap up this episode. You've done a lot of things in your life. Some have gone for you, some haven't. But you've gotten to a place where you are very comfortable and, what some people would call successful. If you could just pick one thing, what's the one thing that you think you've done right in order to get to where you are?
I kept going. I've had lots and lots of failure because I wanted so bad to get out of the industry I was in, because I always thought I could do better. And so especially early on, there was a desperation angle there. So I took a lot of risks, but they were just kind of wild risks. And I was depending more on other people than I was myself. And so I had to kind of learn to just kind of take the bull by the horns myself. And if I didn't know how to do something, I had to go learn how to do it. And then even when I did that, I still failed a lot. And then I started trading, and I failed a lot. So I guess, oddly enough, it kind of goes into what we're talking about here. I just kind of kept going because I didn't know, and I had really felt like I had no other choice. It's either this or wait tables well into my 60s, and when you have those two choices, walking through the fire and just being okay with failing all the time kind of magically becomes easier, believe it or not, because the alternative's worse.
There's a word for that, and that's perseverance. Absolutely agree. All right, you ask me now.
Same question or different question?
Same question.
Rob Reinhold, looking back on your illustrious trading career and your business success, if you had to point to one thing, it can only be one, that got you to where you are now. I know it's a host of things, it always is, but if you had to pick one thing, what would you say that one thing would be?
Consistency. I was actually just talking to my kids. My kids are 25 and 22. And I was telling them, it is so easy as you get older to keep routines. Like, I'm so good at routines now. Like, as far as working out, as far as diet, as far as everything is so easy as you get older, because you start to really get comfortable in making these routines. And I remember when I was 21, it was tough to make routines. Routines were tough, and you just didn't have, the life experience. But the earlier you can get consistency, you are going to win. So I tell my kids all the time, you need to figure out what you're going to do in your life as early as possible. The earlier, the better. Just think about the kid who said, hey, I'm going to be a soccer player. And they said that at 13, and they literally put every ounce that they had into being a soccer player at 13. They're going to be an amazing soccer player. Now, look, they're going to be limited by DNA, of course, at some point, but they're going to be really good. I started to play soccer at age 40, And you know what? I really wanted to be good at soccer. Patrick, how do you think that went?
About as good as it would if I tried at age 40 to start being good at soccer.
You know, I ended up being pretty good. And it was actually pretty exciting because all the players on my team were getting worse with age, and I was getting better. But they were still better than me. After my 7-8 years of playing, when I finally retired, I still wasn't as good as them, even though I tried. Consistency. So figure out what you want to do as soon as you can in life, and then work at that, not expecting to make any money for 5 to 10 years. And this is what I'm telling my kids. Look, you'll get paid, but you're not going to make any real money doing this. But once you put in those years and you pay that price, whatever it is you chose, you know, my son's into cars. If he decided he wanted to be a mechanic, you know, can you imagine spending 10 years super dedicated to being a mechanic and then getting into performance engines? And all of a sudden, you know, 10, 15 years down the road, he's on a race car crew or doing something that looks to be amazing from the outside, but he just went through it. So going back to Roger Federer's talk, you know, I asked Patrick what his was, not quitting. He asked me what mine was, is showing up consistency for years and years and years. That's exactly what Roger Federer was talking about, and that is exactly what it takes to be great, not just at trading, but at everything.
It's funny how you said routine came later in life. It did for me too. And oddly enough, I think once I got my diet in order, because there's so many times where like I would just have no energy, or you know, I have a really bad stomach, or my stomach would be inflamed and just killing me. And all I would want to do instead of doing what I needed to do was go take a nap or lay down or just do nothing, because it just everybody says you have two brains, one in your head, one in your stomach. And it was just killing me. So I kind of wonder if I would have been more of a creature of routine early on in my life. But I'll tell you what, I certainly wasn't. Yeah, and that's a problem. And I think what you said too, with that younger kid applying himself to soccer, some kids just want it. Some kids need to have that structure in their life to where they're pushed to it. Because even if you have one of those, quote, overbearing sports parents, there is a benefit there. A lot of those kids end up being pretty good. They might develop other problems later in life, but their parents made sure that if the kid was not going to provide that consistency like you talked about, that they were going to provide that consistency. Because like you said, it's the only way to get there. You know, I know professional traders. I don't know one of them that just kind of goes in and out whenever they want to and doesn't have any kind of like hard, dedicated structure. They're all pretty calm, chill individuals, and they've all pretty much got their systems down, and that's really all it is. I've said it before on the show. I wish I came up with this line before. I could have shared it in some of my earlier videos, but it's a data entry job to me. I go in, I find out what needs to be traded, what needs to be maintained, what needs to be closed, and then I do that, and then I move on. That's all trading is to me anymore, and my trading has never been more consistent. Funny how that works.
And that, again, I want to just keep going back to this Roger Federer talk. That was his point. That was his point that, yes, points matter. Yes, tournaments matter. But in the long haul, they don't. If you show up every day for the next 40, 50, 60, 100 years, whatever it is, you work hard, you're disciplined, you get that mental game under control. Do not let negative energy get you down. We all have it. I've been very vocal that trading has made me cry twice. On 2 different occasions, it's brought me to tears. Yeah, that happens. That happens, especially in the beginning. Shake it off. Feel sorry for yourself for a little bit. Get back up and go all out. You do that, everything's going to be fantastic. And you know what? It translates over into other parts in your life. I tell everyone, learning how to become a good trader made me better at everything, because I finally understood how to be consistent.
And I've heard a lot of my own subscribers tell me the exact same thing. I mean, gosh, it's got to be in the hundreds probably at this point as far as people who have told me via email or on YouTube or on Discord, wherever the case has been. Yeah, so this really does transcend into everything. And however you get started, whether it's through trading, whether it's through sports, through academics, you know, whatever you can do, just make sure you carry that forward, because it's not the most romantic way to live. I get that. But man, it really does set you up to live any type of lifestyle you want to live going forward. So on that note, traders, thank you for joining us here on the Trading Psychology Podcast. Robb and I will both see you next week.
Bye, everybody.